Hello, everyone, and welcome to skeletal muscle, head and face. Now we're going to exclude masticatory muscles because they collide with the neck, and that's more advanced. I only want to go through the face right now because I don't want to overstress people because muscles are a whole different animal from bones. All right, now this is not comprehensive, but it is an advanced overview because most courses don't actually go over the facial muscles or the posterior face muscles. Now, we're going to go from superior to inferior for this model here. So over here, this first muscle, we have what we call that the occipital frontalis muscle. Now, if you remember from your lecture where they had you memorize the shapes and the different ways to name muscles, well, you could also call this the levator oculi superioris, but remember some of this stuff, a lot of you have to commit to memory, so it actually is called occipital frontalis. There's many ways to name it, but there's only one in the end. All right, now directly inferior to that, we have this funnel-looking muscle. We call that the procerus muscle. And that'll be to make like an angry face or a little bit of frowning. And then let's go with this. And that's probably easier for students to remember because it orbits the eye. We call it an orbicular muscle. So in the Latin, we call this the orbicularis oris. Orbicularis oculi. Oculi because it orbits the eye. And even more inferior, we have this muscle here. And it'll be used to move your nose side to side, if you think about it. So we call it the nasalis muscle. Not surprisingly. And then this thin little muscle here has got a really long name, which I cut one word out. But I encourage you to look it up for yourself because some of your courses might dock you points for that simple reason. But this would be called the levator labii nasali superioris. Now, when you break it down, it all makes sense. Remember, when you're levators, think of elevators, because they elevate, they move things up. Labii means lip, so the labium. Nasali means it's around the nose, and superioris is a superior muscle. Now, next we'll go over the lateral muscle lateral to that. See if we have enough space here. And this one would just be called simply levator labii superioris. Okay, and that's the main levator of the face, the lips. Let's go even more laterally, and what we see it's around the zygomaticofacial foramen. So we would call this top part zygomaticus minor. Remember minor over major. Why? Because the next one inferior to that is the zygomaticus major muscle. And these two are kind of smiling muscles, grinning muscles. All right, let's go more inferiorly. Let's go over the ones we missed here. So right here, well, you see this is also an orbicular muscle. If you look more deep to these chin muscles, you can see it orbiculates or orbits the mouth, the oris. So we call this the orbicularis oris. So you can kind of see the trend here where some of the muscles are straightforward and logical, but others you need to commit to memory, unfortunately. Now, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, so bear with me. If you see this, muscle right here, kind of deep to this, to the other muscle we'll talk about, well, we call that the buccinator. That's for chewing, sucking, or shrinking your mouth, kind of. If you kind of suck inwards and your cheeks go inside, that would be kind of your buccinator muscle. So maybe like when you're drinking through a straw. So we call this one the buccinator muscle. Okay. And next we have right here these two muscles. We're gonna go laterally to medially now. So these two muscles here, and sorry, we'll call that. It's called depressor anguli oris. Now, does it make sense? Well, let's see. Now, when we see its origin, it's kind of at the belly of the mandible, kind of, and it inserts into the corners of the mouth. So what do you think the action will be? Well, it's going to kind of pull the mouth down like that, and that's called depression. Depression of the lower labium, or lower lip. So we call it a depressor, and it's kind of at an angle compared to the other depressor right here, which you will go over shortly. So we call it an anguli, and then oris because it's around the mouth. Okay. So next, we'll go over, this depressor muscle right here, which is kind of more medial and internal to that. Depressor anguli oris. Now, the naming kind of breaks down here, but we will call this the depressor labii inferioris. I apologize for the noise. I don't have my own place. Next, we have this muscle here. It's the most medial, and it is deep to the depressor labii inferioris. It's very small, and well, it kind of attaches to the mental frame. Remember, we learned the skeleton, parts of the skull. Well, then we would call this single muscle, the mentalis muscle. I'll give you guys a little sneak peek here, but I don't really write it because it's part of the masticatory neck section that we'll be doing. But right here we have the temporalis because it's superficial to the temporal bone. And that's a masticatory muscle. And then right here we have the platysma of the neck. It's the most superficial neck muscle. You can see that right there. All right, let's move on to the posterior head muscles, and that'll be it. So I want to turn your attention to these kind of muscles right here, which are really small. They're kind of like similar to the occipitofrontalis, and that they're embedded within the cranioaperneuroses. Well, we would call this collectively the occipitalis muscle. And then, well, you don't need to worry about these because that's not part of our lecture right now. Sorry. And I'm going to zoom in just here. These muscles collectively, we call that, these the suboccipital muscles. Now, why do we call it that? Well, because we have the occipital bone here, and it's inferior to that. So suboccipital, inferior occipital muscles, that's it, this whole thing. But unfortunately, they have their own names. So first, let's go over this guy here. It's bilateral. And we will call this one, this will be called the rectus capitis posterior minor muscle. Now let's break it down. Rectus means straight. This is roughly a straight muscle right here, the fascicle direction. Now we have capitis. Well, it's on the head clearly, so capitis, remember capitate from the carpals, capitis, decapitate, cap means head. And then posterior, well, it's a posterior muscle. minor. Well, it's the smaller of the two rectus muscles, and it's a muscle. Now let's go more laterally to that. Well, this one's very similar in the angle, so we call it the rectus capitis posterior major muscle, because it's the larger of the two recti muscles. Now let's draw a little mid-sagittal plane here so we can kind of separate them and see that they're bilateral. Next we'll go over the obliques. So these two are obliques, and we don't call them minor and major, although we could. Sorry about that again. This most lateral one, we call this the rectus capitis oblique. Actually, I apologize, that's not right. This is called the obliquus capitis superior muscle. Okay, well, let's go over this. Obliquus, apologize my Latin pronunciation of obliquus. Technically, you're supposed to pronounce both U's, but we're in English, so obliquus shall suffice. Oblique, well, these fascicles are kind of, I know they don't look really oblique, but they kind of run obliquely, so we call it the oblique. Capitis is on the head, superior, it's above the inferior capitis, and it's a muscle. Well, that must make this, finally, the obliquus capitis inferior muscle, because it's more inferior to the obliquus capitis superior muscle. So there are our 4 suboccipital muscles. And with that, we conclude our head and face muscles. So watch head part 2 next, because that will include some of the neck muscles and all the masticatory muscles. Thank you for watching.